Welcome back to the School Transportation Nation podcast. It's brought to you by TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing, and by Zoom, the U with the little line over it. I believe it's called a Graze U. It's in the Latvian alphabet, but I don't know. I don't think it's actually Latvian, but you guys know them as Zoom, Z-U-M, the company that reimagines student transportation. They'll have a tip for us a little bit later. And also later, I'll be talking with behavior expert Patrick Mulick, who will be speaking at STN EXPO Indianapolis in June. And of course, I am Ryan Gray, editor-in-chief of School Transportation News, and I'm joined by associate editor Taylor Ekbatani this week. Taylor, good to see you.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. It's great to be on another week.
Absolutely. We have an article up on Patrick Mulick. I mentioned him a second ago, so be sure to check that out. And before we get into the banter, it's gonna, which is gonna tie directly into his conversation in Indianapolis, Taylor, on de-escalation on the school bus. Before we get there, here's that message from Zoom. Remember, with the U with the little line over it. They're the company, again, that reimagines student transportation.
All right, guys, I have a special message this week brought to you by Zoom, the company that reimagines student transportation. Zoom partners with school districts nationwide to provide safe, reliable, sustainable, equitable student transportation for all. Its innovative technology optimizes school routes, tracks children's safe on-time arrival and departure, and connects parents, drivers, and school administrators. Zoom is in the process of transitioning its entire multi-size fleet to electric vehicles and is the first and only 100% carbon neutral student transportation company. Learn more about Zoom at www.ridezum.com. That's ridezoom.com.
All right, Taylor. Well, let's get right into perhaps the most viewed segment on student transportation out there in social media land. A lot of you have seen it, the viral video of a Cleveland area school bus driver by the name of Jackie Miller, who just goes crazy on her students. Last week happened March 29th. Perhaps you've seen it on TikTok or Facebook. It's getting a lot of conversations started out there about what school bus drivers have to deal with. Taylor, I actually talked with Jackie last week for an article. If you head over to stnonline.com, you can find more about it. But it's really interesting. She was telling me, and it's been widely reported, she's been on, nearly every newscast in the last week or so, that, she had just finally had it with these 4 particular junior high kids on her Route A, which was the first route this was going home in the afternoon. And it was the junior high, which is 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. They get on first, and then she picks up the high school kids. Then she goes back for Route B, and she does the elementary school kids and what they refer to at Amherst Exempted Village schools there in the Cleveland area as middle school, which is 4th and 5th. So anyways, they're starting off and these kids get on the bus, and she tells me that apparently they started doing one of their regular tricks of, excessively spraying perfume on the bus, and she has asthma. These are, just a nutshell of some of the behavior issues that she said she's been dealing with not only this whole school year, but also last school year, again, from these 4 particular students. So like I said, they would spray perfume excessively, and she's an asthmatic, Jackie is, and they knew that this would really bug her. Right before then, one of the students sat down and started calling the other students on the cell phone. So all the different cell phones would be ringing. There was bullying. There was some different things going on. She just said that they just made her life a living hell. And she finally snapped. And if you've not seen the video, I believe we're going to have that up on stnonline.com with the article. You can certainly, Google it. It's all over the place. But she launches into about a 2-minute tirade, uses some pretty choice words. So those of you out there who have sensitive ears, to be forewarned, certainly not what you want to see from a school bus driver. And Jackie told me that right after when she sat down in her bus driver's seat, she thought, oh no, what did I just do? This is going to come back and get me. And sure enough, one of the students captured the whole thing. And the superintendent of the school district, Mike Molnar, told me last week that actually a parent posted it to TikTok, and it just, took off from there, garnered millions of views. It attracted the attention, of course, of local media, but of a gentleman by the name of Jeff Grobe, who I also speak with. He is actually lives in a couple towns over from Jackie, saw it and erected a GoFundMe page. He's got a marketing background, and he looked at it and looked at some of the comments just on TikTok and Facebook and saw these people coming to Jackie's defense. It's really interesting, Taylor, because so much of society now has become, this overly politically correct, and you can't do this, you can't do that. And when I first saw it, what jumped out to me was like, oh boy, this is not good. And, Jackie is the first to admit that she was wrong. She shouldn't have done it, but she says she wouldn't take back a word because she felt that she would repeatedly, filed complaints and behavior write-ups on these children. And the junior high principal did nothing with them. I mean, again, this has been going on for 2 years, and she finally had enough. So, it's really interesting, the support she's gotten and, the financial support. When we're recording this podcast, over $62,000 raised so far for Jackie. She's in her 70s. She's a breast cancer survivor. She's been in remission for about 17 years. She was a school bus driver for 9 years, 3 there in the Cleveland area, 6 previously down in Tomball ISD in the Houston area of Texas. In between, she and her husband drove routes for adults with developmental disabilities to work training. So this is someone who definitely has transportation in their blood. And it just goes to show that all of us have a breaking point, and she just reached hers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's interesting, the support that Jackie has felt. All these school bus drivers, power to you, finally speaking up and saying something. And, this hashtag now has gone viral, Team Bus Driver, where other bus drivers, are sharing their stories. And it's not easy. I mean, transporting students, I'm sure, is not easy. And I don't have children of my own, so I really can't speak on this breaking point kind of aspect. But I'm sure if these kids are tormenting her day in, day out, and she's not getting support from administration, she's going to reach that point at some point. I mean, I'm sure we all would.
Absolutely. I'm a parent, and I'll tell you right now, and my kids are, they're wonderful. And, I do have a 2-year-old toddler. So, there are times and, at 2, 3 in the morning also when you're just like, oh my gosh. And you just go, ah. And she had that moment. And when I was speaking with Jeff Grobe, he's a parent, and he said, hey, who of us parents haven't had a situation like this where, sometimes we say some not choice words, but no one's recording us, right? And it really has stood out to me that, people have really backed her. And as we're talking, Taylor, I just went back to the GoFundMe page, and I mentioned it was over 62,000. It's now, just in this matter of minutes, it's now past 63,000. So by the time this podcast comes out, who knows? I know that in talking with Jeff, he's raised the limit several times. I think he started out like $5,000 and just all of a sudden saw the groundswell and, I need to raise it more to 10, 15, 30. Now it's up to, the goal is $80,000, and he wants to, allow her to go on vacation. She had, her car was on its last tires, last legs, fixed income. I mentioned that, she and her husband are lifelong transporters. They actually got their start as long haul truckers. And Jackie was telling me that, several years ago when she first went to work for Tomball ISD in Houston, she no longer wanted to be on the road all the time. And, it was basically a sole proprietorship with her and her husband. And she said she was actually kind of done working for her husband, and she wanted to do something else. She's more of a homebody, wanted to stay home, and just fell in love with school bus driving. So again, she said that's the biggest pain that she still has, is just not seeing her kids, because she said, aside from those four problem students, everybody else was wonderful. And I mentioned to her even, after this happened and then she went and got the high school kids, what happened. And she said, oh, the high school kids are great. And she said, but it was interesting. The rest of that drive, those four students didn't say a peep. And she said, which she knew that she finally got to them because they were just like, they just sat there. They didn't want to even look, have her look sideways at them. But again, she knew that she had overstepped the line. And then she didn't know, she's not on the internet. So she didn't know about all this, going on TikTok and whatnot, until she got a phone call later that evening from the superintendent, Mike Molnar, who told her about it. And she said that he, offered paid administrative leave while an investigation ensued, and that she said, no, I resign. He has a little bit different recollection. He told me that he was on the phone with her no more than 30 seconds, and she said, I resign. And then that he offered the paid leave, and that she still said no. But regardless of the fact, she just had it. She's in her 70s. And, when I was talking to her, I asked her a question. I said, here's a pop quiz for you. We recently did a study, and it's in our April magazine issue. We did a survey. We asked what were the leading causes for school bus drivers to resign. And I said, do you know what number one was? And she said, behavior, student behavior. And I said, yeah, absolutely right. So again, I've been having these conversations with school bus drivers, with student transportation leaders for decades, literally, where, they tell me the number one distraction on the road for a school bus driver, it's not cell phones, it's not other drivers, it's students. Again, now we're seeing that the leading cause for them to quit or resign is student behavior, and it comes back to something else we've often talked about is the lack of support for school buses and school bus drivers at the buildings, at the schools. The junior high principal who I reached out to, he did not respond, but Mike Molnar did, the superintendent, and said he was responding for the principal as well, but didn't address the question I asked them about what Jackie said, that repeatedly she filed complaints about these students. She told me, she worked with the transportation supervisor, she worked with the transportation assistant and on filling out these reports, and nothing would ever happen. And I think, again, that this is a much broader conversation. Yes, she went too far, but we're all human, right, Taylor? I mean, we can only handle so much. And, granted, she later, a little bit later in life, for the most part, you could refer to her as maybe in the retired set, but it's just, who wants to deal with that when you're making, $18 an hour? It's just when you could be making that same amount of money at McDonald's. It's a microcosm of the much larger issues.
Right. And not to mention, Ryan, we're talking about this in 2020, right? 2023. Had this occurred, let's say 10, 20 years earlier, no one would even know about it.
Mm-hmm.
And there would just be the words of the student versus the words of the school bus driver. So I think it's interesting, we talk about technology and how it helps, and it does, right? But there's also this idea where we're losing this human nature, where it's everything we say now is potentially recorded and everything that we do. And so it's almost like we need to have this, flashing lights in the back of our head, like, hey, watch how you act, watch what you say. And so it's interesting.
Yeah, well, I a little bit later, I'm going to be sitting down with Patrick Mulick, and we actually recorded his interview just a couple days after the Jackie Miller incident, and really hadn't gotten on our radar yet. I think I had maybe just received a text of the video earlier that day, so I didn't really get a chance to ask Patrick about it. But certainly he'll be addressing this in Indianapolis in June when he talks about de-escalation. So of course he's a certified behavior analyst. He, his day job, he works with, primarily students on the autism spectrum, but his talk is about students with special needs. It's about general population, and it's about how to address when someone is escalated. That could be parents. We've seen a huge uptick in angry parents. I was talking about this last week on the podcast. In terms of security incidences, the most mundane type of incident that drivers will likely see, aside from, what we see in the news about the mass shootings and bombings and kidnappings and whatnot, is an angry parent approaching the bus. How do you diffuse that situation? And so, Patrick is trained on this kind of thing. But, one of my points to when I was talking with Jeff Grobe, who started the GoFundMe page for Jackie Miller, and to your point, Taylor, is, I'm sure over the last 2 years, obviously Jackie got to this point. She tried other methods to get through these kids. It wasn't working. Now, we don't know exactly, what has transpired and, what kind of de-escalation was used. I asked the school district about some of the training they have for bus drivers, and I didn't get a response. Granted, they were on spring break, but, the superintendent did finally get back to me. But, in terms of that de-escalation, if Jackie had sat down with those kids and said, hey, guys, look, you can't do this, and this is why, because it's distracting, then you wouldn't have students in the back recording that, because that's just not exhilarating enough. That's not going to do anything for TikTok. But certainly a grown adult, yelling and screaming at kids and saying F this and G damn that. And, one of my favorite quotes was, I'm going to paraphrase here, of course, but was, I'm going to stick my foot so far up your bleep that it's going to be dangling out your nose. And it actually prompted a T-shirt by an apparel company. They're in Vermilion, Ohio, which is in the Cleveland area, Mistake on the Lake. So I was joking with Jackie. I said, well, hey, maybe you're going to get an apparel deal too. But, all kidding aside, it just, unfortunately, in today's TikTok age, streaming videos, 24/7 news cycle, if it bleeds, it leads. I've heard that saying for decades, as a journalist and from college all the way up to now. But yeah, it's those scintillating incidences. It's those, wow moments that really get people's attention. And hopefully we can make some good of this. And it is very encouraging to see everyone rallying behind Jackie. So as we transition, we're going to hear from Patrick Mulick again. But first, we want to hear from our friends at TransFinder.
Hey, Ryan, do you remember the dynamic duo Batman and Robin from the old 60s show Bang Boom Pow, right? Well, there's a new dynamic duo on the scene. That's TransFinder's Route Finder Plus and Wayfinder. Route Finder Plus is TransFinder's award-winning industry-leading routing solution, and Wayfinder is the driver app that is changing the way drivers and subs approach their routes. Together, this pair provides the winning combination to help combat your school transportation woes, including driver shortage, inefficiencies, student discipline issues, while helping you improve the driver experience. Route Finder Plus is intuitive, browser-based, and includes route optimization to help you build the most efficient routes possible. Wayfinder, the driver app, provides turn-by-turn instructions and allows users to take attendance and work seamlessly with Plus. You guys can learn more about this dynamic duo by emailing getplus@transfinder.com or giving them a call at 800-373-3609.
Hey, folks, we want to welcome back to the School Transportation Nation podcast stage our good friend Patrick Mulick. A lot of you remember him from TSD, STN EXPO Reno. He's going to be keynoting for us in Indianapolis in June. Patrick, it's good to see you, buddy.
Good to be here. Good to be back with the family at STN. I'm excited for Indy.
Absolutely. You can't see him out there, all you in the nation, but he's donning his Gonzaga Bulldogs golf shirt in mourning. I think by the time this is airing, I know when we're recording this, the Final Four was just about ready to happen. His team, my team, the Arizona Wildcats, we always hope to be in the Final Four. It wasn't in the cards this year. By the time this hits the airways, the national championship will already be crowned. But Patrick still, condolences. He's there in spirit with his team. Never say die.
It's an emotional experience every single time.
It is. The tournament every March and April, it's a great time, but also can be just heartbreaking. But anyways, let's talk about students on school buses. Let's talk about de-escalation. That's going to be the topic of your conversation in June at STN EXPO Indianapolis. I know we have an article up on the website. Everyone, if you haven't registered yet, please head over to stnexpo.com/east. Got a great agenda planned. Of course, you can learn more about Patrick and what he's going to talk about. But Patrick, let's just jump into it. De-escalation, so much has been in the news and continues. Obviously, just a couple of weeks ago, we had that tragedy in Nashville at the Covenant School. We've had all these other school shootings. We've had, problems at school bus stops. We've had problems on the bus. A lot of this might not be new. Maybe it's the frequency, but, take us through that a little bit. What you're going to be trying to bring to the attendees at STN EXPO Indianapolis and what you kind of want to talk about.
Yeah, no, super excited to be at Indy and to bring this conversation. It's so important, especially with what we're witnessing out there in the world today. When we think about de-escalation, so often we think about taking control of a situation that has become escalated. And what we forget is that we don't really control other people. I mean, outside of putting our hands on people and forcing their body in a specific way, when we talk about de-escalation, it's not about control, it's about influence. And how, in any given circumstance, whether we're working with an escalated parent or working with an escalated student, it's about making sure that we're able to provide that proper influence. We think about our roles in being able to de-escalate someone, and so much of it is bringing our calm presence to an escalated circumstance and bringing someone else down. Too often when we think about escalation and supporting someone who's escalated, we think about control, we think about intimidation, and it's not that. It's about providing comfort and care for that person who is escalated to help bring them down and to get them to a better space. And for ourselves, we have to remember that if we're going to have that positive influence, we have to come in and be that positive presence. We have to be someone who's cool, calm, and collected ourselves. And that starts out with us being an individual who is taking care of themselves, an individual who is able to handle stress. When you think about these situations that we've been witnessing, or even just situations that you might encounter with a parent or with a student, we can become escalated ourselves because we become emotional about what we are interacting with or what we're observing. And if we become emotional, then that can cause us to escalate. And someone who's escalated, dealing with an escalated situation, that will never end well. So when we think about that conversation around de-escalation, it's always going to start with us. And it's then going to go into, okay, so what are we doing when we're cool, calm, and collected? What are those strategic things we need to make sure that we're doing? And so when we get together in Indy in June, I'm going to be talking about those pieces. I'm going to be zooming in to what de-escalation needs to look like on the front lines, whether we're talking about interacting with adults, interacting with students with disabilities, all of it. And then I'll be zooming out, taking a look at the big picture. Okay, what are we doing systemically to support our staff to have those effective strategies? What are we doing to make sure that they're engaging in that self-care? What are we doing to make sure that they have the information they need in order to be successful on the front lines when they're working with students and families?
And like I mentioned earlier, so many people know you from our TSD conference. And obviously, your day job, for those of you who don't know, you're the Assistant Director of Autism and Student Independence at Auburn School District in Washington State, not far from Seattle. So, obviously, and you're also a certified behavior analyst, correct?
Correct.
But this talk you're going to be looking at all students, correct? Not simply the ones that might be on the spectrum or might be in special needs and be on one of those routes, but in terms of just kind of general practice for transportation folks. And what about also too dealing with each other? I mean, peers, working with parents, because one of the things that when I talk to a lot of security experts, and our own training has shown this, is that, in the news, yes, we have these tragic incidences like happened at the Covenant School in Nashville a couple of weeks ago, these different school shootings, and there's hundreds of these school shootings that are happening already just this school year. Those make the news, right? But there's mundane things that happen every day. A lot of times parents just, upset at school bus stops. I was having a conversation the other day about, so many buses are late right now because of the driver shortage. So you get parents that are showing up at the bus stop. Where's the bus? Why are you late? I'm late for work. You're going to be talking a little bit about those kind of de-escalation as well. It's not just driver or attendant to student, correct?
Yeah, no, this is something that applies across the board. And actually, you're probably going to walk away thinking, gosh, in my own personal life, like when I go home, when I'm interacting with my spouse or my kids,
exactly.
These are things I need to make sure that I'm doing. And really, the analogy I like to go to is when we think about being someone who is going to be skilled at de-escalating, you have to think about yourself as a chain breaker. So someone who is going to interrupt a chain of events. Because when a parent gets upset, because the bus is late and they're escalated, it's typically not just because that one thing happened. It's because they didn't sleep well last night. They're dealing with stress from the bills. Their job is hard. Their kids were difficult in the morning. The coffee maker wasn't working. The cat made a mess in the living room last night. And then you're just kind of cranky in general. And then on top of that, the bus is late, right? And then that's right, the piece that leads to the escalated person, right? So often we just think about it as an isolated incident. Oh my gosh, like I was just late this one time and this person in front of me is completely overreacting. We have to remember that that person is reacting in a way that they are because of a chain of events that took place. And you can feed into that and they can continue to be escalated, or you can come in with a calming presence and hear that person out and support them to be in a better state of mind. But to do that, you have to think about yourself as a chain breaker. You have to stop the chain of events that are happening that are leading to an escalated situation.
And some of those ways that I've just heard, and this probably you're going to get into this and more, but I've often heard that when that escalated person is up here, they're like, "Hey, Patrick, what are you doing? Why are you late?" And you don't match that tone. You come down lower. Well, I understand that. And this is, I'm this very unfortunate. And that a lot of times by doing that, you bring that other person's level down. Because again, if you try to overpower them, is what you're saying, it's just going to keep spiraling out of control.
Exactly. And that's the mistake people make, is like, wait, if I yell at them long enough to get my point across, then everything will be fine, or at least I'll feel better about it. And you have to come in as that humble person. And even though the person is very escalated, they're up high, you need to come in low. Cool, calm, and collected, provide an abundance of empathy and understanding. And really what you're doing for them in that moment is modeling for them what we want this conversation to look like. And the more we're able to model that, so often we find that the other person eventually comes down. And when people are both at that regulated state, that's when the problem solving can take place. We can't problem solve when one of the two people involved in the situation is completely escalated, because they're not able to think through all the information that they need to consider to get to a better place.
Absolutely. And another thing I often hear too is when you're dealing with an escalated person, you probably shouldn't say, "Calm down."
No,
that doesn't work out.
That's the worst intervention of all time. Never in the history of someone being upset has someone else walked in and said, "You know what? Would you just calm down?" And they're completely losing their mind. They hear that and they go, "Oh, yes, calm down. That's right. Oh, yeah. Yes, silly me. Let me sit down. Calm down. I forgot. Thank you for that reminder."
Absolutely. So, well, I'm really looking forward to that conversation. I'm certainly going to learn a lot. Like you said, even dealing with your spouse and your children at home, there's certainly a lot of stressors in life. And speaking of which, I think the last time we had you on the podcast was when we were coming out of COVID. I think we're well out of it now. I mean, I know people are still getting it, and it's still kind of a concern. It has changed our way of life. I see a lot more people wearing masks still out and about town. I do it. As you probably can hear, I have a cold and have had one for a couple weeks. But life goes on. I have to go to the pharmacy. I have to go places. I have my mask on. But, a lot of life is coming back to normal, quote unquote. But one thing that is not normal, I think, and this really plays into a lot of what you're talking about, is everyone's mental health. So much has been published and talked about mental health anyways, but especially coming out of COVID. Curious, if we take a look back at what you're doing daily there at Auburn School District, can you kind of tell us, and especially from a transportation angle, what you're seeing with the students maybe as well as with the staff when it comes to mental health? And obviously your day job, you're working mostly with students on the spectrum. But kind of what are you seeing from the ground there when we're talking about mental health?
Coming out of COVID, from our students, we've seen just an abundance of behavioral challenges. We have a greater number of students with behavioral challenges, and the intensity of that behavior is much higher than it was previously. And that's not just my work here in Auburn. I talk to colleagues around the country, and they're seeing the same thing. So there's that compounded effect from that. We have some students who are still coming back to us. They haven't been in school for 3 years. And the impact on that, and then just in public education, there's the stress of, okay, well, we're going to get back to business as usual like we were before the pandemic. And, the funding that has been coming in to help mitigate some of the challenges from COVID, like that's going to go away. So there's all that compounds to increased stress for the adults who are doing the work on the front lines. And so we've definitely been seeing a need for more behavioral support with where we're at. Just before COVID, where I live, my district got our first board certified behavior analyst as specifically for supporting behavioral challenges, right? So that's the certification I have. And I was the only one in my district as an administrator. And we were able to hire someone to do that work just to support staff on the front lines and supporting students with behavioral challenges. And the need has increased so much. So now we have 4 of those who are helping lead that conversation and coach up staff on how to best support students who have behavioral challenges, those who have the potential to escalate. And across the board, I think in the field of education, we've just seen the need for more mental health professionals, more behavioral supports, because the need is out there, right? We're seeing it in our students that get on our buses every single day. We're seeing it in our students that come into our schoolhouse every single day, that there's greater behavior challenges. And because of that, there's just a need for greater expertise to figure out how to make this happen in an effective way for those that we work with, and really to make sure that everyone else feels supported, right? So if you're a teacher, if you're a bus driver, if you're a paraprofessional, and you're feeling this extra weight, this extra load, you need to feel like you have someone to reach out to or a resource to reach out to know how to better address the complex situations that are being seen every single day.
Absolutely. Thanks for that. Really looking forward to you speaking in Indianapolis. And before we go, like I said, a lot of the folks out there in the nation, they know you from our TSD conference. You have been to STN EXPO Reno before. This is going to be your first time at STN EXPO Indy. So looking forward to that. You obviously, though, aside from your day job, you are speaker extraordinaire. And again, if you haven't seen Patrick speak, you have to register for STN EXPO Indy. I think we were been talking about, hey, maybe getting you involved in TSD again next year. Patrick is just wonderful, great guy, and just as engaging as you can imagine. I mean, you can't even imagine how much fun and how much everybody loves seeing you speak. So tell us about, what you've been doing on the speaking tour lately. Where have you been? Where are you going aside from Indianapolis in June? How's the speaking circuit been going well for you?
No, it's been great. It's been great. Just recently I was down in Eugene, Oregon, talking at one of the state conferences that they have there. We had a few hundred transportation professionals there. I was out in Alaska in February, first time ever.
Ooh.
I had an earthquake in the middle of me talking.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. And you just probably went right. You just flowed with it. You just went right on cue.
I was like, oh yeah, that's all part of it. It was funny because I had just gotten done doing the autism experience, like giving people that perspective of what it feels like to have autism. We all sit down and then there's this earthquake. I'm like, oh, okay. Perfect timing. But no, I've been out busy doing that. I've got a busy circuit for the summer coming up, going out to the Midwest, here locally in Washington State. But it's all great. Like, it fills my cup. And if I'm able to better empower those who are working with our kids, whether they be classroom educators or educators who work on the school bus, I'm happy to be a helpful hand. And if I can inspire those in the process, even the better.
And you all juggle it with like what you have, like what do you and your wife have now? 15 kids at home? What is it?
Something like that. I should probably learn their names. No, we have 4 kids. They're very busy. Yeah, a 12, 10, 7, and 2-year-old.
And you're homeschooling. Your wife is.
And we're homeschooling. Yes.
Your wife is, like I've told you this on a number of occasions, your wife is a saint.
Yeah.
She is a walking saint among us. I don't know how anyone does that. My wife and I, we can't wait to like, oh, schools, we gotta go. Come on, get in the car, let's go. Because just those 3 weeks of when we had our daughter home with COVID, because we were lucky she was in a private preschool at the time, so they never closed. But we did keep her home for about 3 weeks, and we were, after that 3 weeks, we had bought all the apps, and we just were like, oh my gosh. So I mean, here it is years later, and you guys are not only doing the app thing at home and the remote, but the full-on homeschool. So,
well, and yeah, I got to give my wife credit. She is the most amazing person I've ever met. And she switched from being a legal assistant to homeschooling 3 kids at 3 different grade levels and raising a baby. And we're a few years down the road from that. And she's done such a good job that the kids don't want to go back. Right? They love like getting to sleep in a little bit and it just being simple and staying home. So yeah, credit to her 1,000 times. She is just an incredible person.
And especially with you being out on the road, unfortunately, we're gonna steal you away for a few days in June. But I think it'll certainly be well worth it for all involved. Our attendees, again, Patrick Mulick, he's going to be speaking June 5th at the Indiana Convention Center. So be sure to head over to stnexpo.com/east, register. And again, you can read more about Patrick. Patrick Mulick, again, my condolences for Gonzaga leaving early. I know you shared your condolences with the University of Arizona leaving early from the NCAA tournament, but life goes on. We're going to move forward. We're going to see each other in June. We're going to have a great time. Everyone's going to learn so much from you. And thanks so much for coming on again and sharing your wisdom.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to Indy. It's going to be amazing.
Thanks, Patrick. See you soon. All right. Thanks again to Patrick. Great thoughts there. And again, we're looking forward to seeing him and all of you in Indianapolis for our STN EXPO Indianapolis. A reminder on that, the early bird deadline ends April 28th. But first, this week, April 14th, is the super early bird deadline for STN EXPO Reno in July. So hurry up and reserve your spot. We also want to thank our episode sponsors, TransFinder and Zoom. Appreciate your support. And visit stnonline.com for the latest on everything going on in the school bus and school transportation industry. And remember to subscribe to the STN podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you consume your podcasts. And tell your friends. We love those 5-star ratings as well. Thanks so much, Nation. We'll see you next week.